I know last time I said we were going to do the speed pad, but we actually need a color changing floor first. So we're going to go through that and do a color changing floor, and then next will be the speed pads. So let's start with creating a C# script. I'm going to call this color changing floors. And then let's open that and open everything but that. Color changing floor, awesome. All right. So the reason we need this first is we need this as well for the speed and the slow pads to make them toggle. So, well, not to functionally toggle, but to visually toggle, because we want this to run alongside what's going to happen. So this will be for toggling the colors of floors. So let's go and we'll add some variables. Let's serialize field, and we're going to have a float. We're going to call it color 1 duration, color 1 duration, and then we're going to have a second one of these called color 2 duration. Yeah, that. Perfect. We're going to have a float for time. We have a bool called in first color. Which we're going to set to true for it starting. We're going to have a bool for a startup delay. We're going to make this serialized field. Bool start up delay. And then we're going to have a float for start up delay duration. This is so we can set up a delay to starting off for timing purposes. Really wants to put in floats, and then we're going to have a game object for our object to change. Type it so much there. No, just double key because there's a second word there. What have I misspelt here? It's a capital O. Object to change, and then we're going to need the renderer of the object. We're going to need the renderer, and then finally let's add in some serialized materials. Material 1, material 2. Okay. And then finally, let's set up a functionality for toggling the colliders. We need a little bit more information. The header for this one. We could use more headers throughout this, but let's just leave it like this for now. Bool toggle colliders, and then box collider. Let's call this box collider. Okay, So that's all the variables that we need for this script. Now let's start in start. So if object change equals null, we're going to set object change equal to this dot game object. So if for some reason there is no object you haven't set something else as the object to change, the thing that holds this script will automatically be set as the object to change. And then renderer equals object to change dot get component renderer. So we want to grab the renderer component from the object, and then just one more check if color. I actually don't think that's necessary. I don't know why I did that on my other code. Let's just skip that. Let's go time equals 0. Um, okay. So sorry, we missed one float. So we also have we need a float for start up time as well for our delay. Okay. All right. So we also want to set that to 0. It's just setting our time and our startup time to 0 on start. So it's probably unnecessary. It should really be 0 on start, but for some reason, if it isn't, for functionality purpose, this makes sure it's always doing what we want it to. Okay, so then we go if there is a startup delay. Then we want to do this. We go startup time plus equals time.delta time. So time.delta time is a period of time that isn't, it's the real pass of time. It doesn't get affected by game speed or frames per second or anything. It's the actual time that has really passed. So that's why we're always using this one, because it refers to a real amount of time that's passed. I'm sure there's other use cases for the other times that you can use, but I always use time.delta time for any calculations. Okay, next we're going to check if our startup time is less than our startup duration, and if that is the case, we're going to return. Okay. So we've basically made like a closed loop in our code here. So where are we missing a bracket? At the bottom of this if. Okay. So we're adding time to our startup time. Yep, we're adding time to our startup time. And if our startup time is still less than the duration that we want to wait for, we're going to return. So we're just going to go back to the top and run code from here in a circle until this if condition is no longer met. And then if it is met for our else, we're going to put in Startup delay equals false. We want to, don't like this new version of Visual Studio not making my lines how I'm used to. Okay, let's clean it up. Okay, perfect. So once our time gets greater than our startup delay duration, we're going to set our startup delay to false, and we're no longer going to enter this if statement. So if there's a delay, we're going to loop here until the delay passes, and then we'll get into our actual code. So let's start here. So we go time plus equals time dot delta time. So that's why we needed the two different. We've got a startup time, which we will no longer use once the startup delay is completed, and then a time that we'll use for the changing between the two. And then we're going to go if in first color, then object, let's just renderer on this one, renderer dot material is equal to color one. Did we? No, we made the material because it's a better name for it. Material one. And then we go if time is greater than color one duration, then we're going to set in first color equal to false. And I really hate that it keeps doing this. And we're also going to set time equal to 0. So if we're on our first color, which is we've set to true, where's the ball? Here. So we set that to true at the start. So this will be true at first. We're going to set the material of the game object to be material 1, which is our first color. And then once the time is greater, because we're adding time in real time to our time, we're going to set this to false, and we're going to change the time back to 0, and then we're going to do the exact same thing except in an else statement and with color 2. Else let's just copy all of this to make it easy and then modify it. This should be color 2 duration, this should be material 2, and this should be set it to true. Alright, so once again, we're just, while the time is less, because that is, the time is not in these if statements, it's in its own. We're going to have the color set to material 2 for the duration of why it's not entering this if statement. And then as soon as time is greater than the duration, it's going to set in first color and set time back to 0, and it's going to loop between these two lines of code. Okay, now we're going to set up a little bit to toggle the colliders. So we're going to check if we've set it to toggle colliders. And if we have, can we please Visual Studio. And then we go if in first color And then if it's in first color, we're going to set box collider dot is trigger is equal to false, and then else to true. So all we're doing is when it's in its first color, the box collider is not a trigger, it's a normal box collider, so the player will collide with it and not be able to pass through the box. But then when it's in its second color, because this no longer will be true, when it's in its second color, it will enter this code and it will make the box collider a trigger collider, which means the player can fall through the box. So let's set this up and see if everything's working as we want it. Okay. So make sure you save your script so it updates in Unity. I'm going to create a cube. I'm going to do it the same way as last time and go 5.25. We're going to, let's grab it, move it down a little bit. We're going to add the script on. Alright, so we have all of our variables. So the object to change is itself. Let's change it to color changing floor. Let's make it itself, and then let's create some new materials. Create, where is it? Materials. Let's make this one like a red. Like a bit of a, let's make it a bit of a transparent red instead. Let's put this on so we can see it while we do it as well. We're running out of different colors to do, aren't we? That kind of looks cool. Okay. And then let's call this one not, we'll call this toggle floor red. And then let's duplicate that. This is the other one. Let's rename this to toggle floor green. And then let's change that to like a greeny color. Are we happy with that? It looks a little bit different, but it's not that different from the other green. Let's go more like that. Okay. Just running out of colors, just trying to make more colors. Okay, so let's set its color 1 to the green and its color 2 to the red. So let's set our durations to like 3 each. Let's set a startup delay so we can see it working to 2. And then give it its own box collider and set it as is a toggle. So we should be able to see it swapping between a trigger or not here. So let's run this. So once we start running, we see startup delay is no longer on, and we're not toggling. Do we have an error? Nope. It is toggling the trigger, but it's not toggling the materials. Okay. Let's work out why. So they're not throwing any errors. Oh, I see what we did. We dragged the wrong square onto it. I was like, I swear I saw something changing. Okay, so this is working. We just dragged the bounce pad on by accident. Alright, so after the startup delay is gone, we start to trigger, and you can see when it's red, there is a trigger. So the reason you have this startup delay, so let's duplicate this. Okay, let's set them exactly the same, but for instance, we don't want this one to have a startup delay. So now we can set timings. So for instance, you wanted to make multiple of these pads that you could jump across at different times. Well, now these are desynced from each other because of our startup delay. So this is how you will now be able to create patterns with them by setting a series of startup delays and then changing durations. So you could change it so one color lasts a really long time as well and the other doesn't. So say you only wanted it to be available to be stood on for a moment. So you can play with that however you like. Next we'll do some speed pads, but we needed these to be able to change color so we could toggle between a speed and a slow floor for toggling floors for that as well. Okay, thank you. See you in the next one. See you in the next video.